Hey guys, and welcome back to another YouTube video. In today's video, we'll see how we can add multiple language support to a React Native project. So let's get started. First, we need to install some dependencies. So you can open a terminal in your project directory, and then you can type npm install i18next, and the other package will be React i18next, and then you can hit enter. When the installation is completed, you can close the terminal. Then inside the root directory of your project, you can create a folder called locales. And inside this folder, you can create separate JSON files for each language that you want to support. For example, you see that I've created two files, one for English and one for Swedish. And these files will contain the translation keys and their corresponding translation values. So for example, in this English, you see that I have a JSON object that have some keys, and each keys have a corresponding translation. And you can see in a Swedish we have same keys, but the translation will be in a Swedish. Okay, now let's set up the configuration for i18next in our app. So in your project's root directory, you can create a new folder called services. So you can see I've already created. And you also see that I have a file called the languages list.json. We will use this file later. So for right now, you can just ignore it. Inside this services folder, you can create a new file called i18next.js. Okay, so here at the top, you can import the i18next from i18next, and then you can import init react i18next from react i18next. Then we can import our translation files. So we can import the English from locales, and then english.json. Then we can do the same for the Swedish. Okay, so after these imports, now we can use the i18next. So you can type i18next, and then you can type use, and then we can pass the init react i18next. So in this line, we are using the use method provided by the i18next instance to add the init react i18next to our localization setup. And the init react i18next is a plugin specifically designed for integrating the i18next with the React applications. So basically, it will provide React specific features and hooks that make it easier to handle translation with the React components. Then we need to type .init to initialize this i18next, and then we can pass an object to this init method. And the first key that will this object will have is compatibility JSON, and then it will be version 3. Then we have the LNG for language, and it will be the default language, which will be English. And then we have the fallback language, and it will be also English. The fallback language will be the language that will be used when, so for example, if we have a Swedish and there is a key, or the app is searching for a key that is not available in this file, so therefore it will go back to the English, and it will take the English version instead. And the last key that we will pass will be resources. The resources will contain the available languages and their corresponding translation. And actually for this one, we will create another variable, so we can do it before this initialization. Here we can type const and then language resources, and it will be an object. And here we will have different languages, so we can start by English, and then it will have another object, and this object will have a key called translation, and then we will pass the translation file or the translation JSON that we've imported. So here for the English it will be English, and then we can do the same for the Swedish. Like that. Then we can pass this language resources to as a value to this resources key here at the bottom. So, and why I've created a separate variable for this is because I want to export it, because we will need it in app.js later. Okay, so our setup is completed. Now we just need to export the i18next instance. So we can type export default and then i18next. So then we can go back to our app.js, and here we need to update this component so it is using the translated text instead of the hard-coded text. And for that we're going to use a hook that is called use translation, and it is provided by React i18next. So we can import it. From React i18next. We also need to import the i18next instance from our file i18next in services. Then to use this hook we can just call it like this, and when we are calling it we will get back a method called t, and we can use this t method to get the value for a translation. So for example, here for welcome to my app, you see we have a key that is welcome, so we can use that key. So we can remove it, and then we can call the t with a key, and the key was welcome. So here we go. You see that we have welcome, and here the text is still as it should be. Then we can do the same for change language. So here we can call the t with a key, and the key will be change -language. So we can just paste it here. Here we go. Okay, now there is just one more thing that I want to do in this tutorial, and it is adding the functionality to this change language, so user can switch between different languages, and in our case it will be just Swedish and English. For that we can add a modal before this text, and we also need to import it. We can also import the import the view and the flat list. So inside this modal we can have a view, and inside this view we can have a flat list. So whenever this button is clicked, this modal will be visible, and inside this modal user will be able to change the language. So this modal will be visible whenever the visible state is true, and as I said, it will be a state, so we can add it here, set visible, and by default it is false. We also need to import the user state hook from React like that. And as I said, this when this button is clicked, so this modal should be visible. So for that we need to edit this on a press, and here we will set the visible to true. We also on a request close, we want to set the visible to false like that. Then I'm gonna add some styles here for the view. Styles dot language list. So as you saw, I've already added here at the bottom the styles, and therefore I can access them. Then for the data here, for the data we will use object dot keys, and we will extract the keys of language resources, this that we've imported from i18next. So if we click on it, so the keys will be this English and Swedish. So we'll have a list of 2 keys. Then we will use these keys to extract the name of these languages. So it is the point. So it is the point that we will use this file, as I said before. So here, render item. So for render item, we will render a touchable opacity. Inside it, we will have a text. If I save it, so the text will be the name of the language, and to access the name of the language, we can get the language list. So first we need to import the language list from this file. So we can import language list from services and then language list.json. So now we can use those keys to access the name of the language. So here, when we imported the language list, we can then access the item, which will be a key, and then when we've selected the language, we can get the native name of it. So if we go back to this language list, you see we have a name and native name, and we will use this native name, and that's it. Then we can add some styling to this button. So styles dot language button, and we can also add a style to this text, and it is the styles dot language name, like that. And if I click on this change language button right now, you see we got the list here with the model, which is visible. But right now, when I click on it, nothing happened. And it is because we didn't add the event handler to this button. Now to change the language, we can add here and on a press handler for this button. And we want to change the language to the item, like that. And we can name it change language. Then we will add this function here at the top. So we'll get the language, and for changing language, it is actually quite simple. So we can use the i18next that we've imported here, the instance, and then there is a method change language, and we can change the language to this that we've got here as argument. And when we change the language, we need to set the visible to false, so the model will be disappeared. And that's it actually. So now let's test it and see if it is working. So if I click on it and change the language to Swedish, and here we go. As you can see, the language was changed. Okay, so that was the last thing that I want to show you in this video. I hope it was helpful and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate it. So see you in another video.